Graham Vincent, violin maker and musician. Just a quick one this week about scrapers, which are massively important to violin makers and basically to anyone who does anything with wood, really. There's some really simple principles that you need to understand about scrapers. So it's going to be to the drawing board, I'm afraid, first of all, just to show you the theory, and then we'll crack into how to sharpen, well, in fact, how to make a scraper, how to sharpen a scraper effectively, and also how to use one. So back to the drawing board first of all. You might be using any type of scraper. I mean, as a violin maker, you use round scrapers and all sorts of shapes like this, all sorts of bizarre stuff. Furniture makers will generally be using rectangular scrapers, about that size, a bit bigger maybe, that sort of thing. On these, you'd sharpen the whole edge. On that one, you'd probably sharpen that and that. On these two, you'd probably just sharpen the long edges. So for the sake of this, let's imagine you've got a rectangular cabinet scraper, fairly typical one. What I'm going to draw now is looking at that edge there. Okay, so what I'm drawing here is the edge of the scraper. What we're trying to end up with is a really sharp little hook like that. I exaggerate it obviously. A really sharp little hook on the edge. So the way that you do that, first of all, you need to sharpen, cut, grind, mill, file the edge so it's a really nice, sharp, clean square. And then you use something called a burnisher, which I'll show you, to form this edge on it. So start with that. The next thing you do, oh, there's a jet going over. Blimey. The next thing you do is you use a burnisher and you push this thing backwards and forwards on that edge to really define and sharpen that edge. You do both sides. You use it across the top as well. And the whole purpose of that is to sort of really get a nice, sharp, clean edge on it. The next thing you do is then at an angle use the burnisher, which then causes the edge to sort of start to do that. If you can imagine that. Obviously I'm exaggerating all of these things. You then use the burnisher across the top that way, which folds this sharpened, exaggerated edge outwards. You're doing this at all times, you're doing this on all four sides. So you end up with this beautifully sharp hooked edge, top and bottom. That's all you're trying to do. All I've got to do now is find where I put the lid for the pen. I've had this pen in my hand for only a minute or two and I have already managed to lose the lid. It's disappeared, the magical disappearing pen lid. Oh well, let's not worry about that for the moment, I'll find that later. Okay, so we need a scraper. First of all, you can make one, and the absolute ideal material to start with is an old saw blade. This is one of these sort of non-sharpenable, I mean these are excellent carpentry saws, which are just thrown away. You can normally find them on building sites just being discarded, and they make absolutely wonderful scrapers. The other thing you can do is just buy one. So I'm going to do both. I've just picked one off Amazon at random. I don't know what quality's like, who knows. Okay, so a scraper, and we'll make something similar from the saw blade. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I've been a bit ill recently. I'm slowly getting better, but the workshop is an absolute disgrace at the moment. I've got a whole load of hand tools as well I've been given to help maintain this thing. So it's such a state in here, but hopefully we'll get that sorted out fairly soon. Let's cut a scraper from this as well, so we're comparing the two. That should do it. Disorganisation is far from ideal. I do apologise. time to admit this saw blade is blunt. Get another one out. Well, I think I've shown that you can cut them by hand if you want to. But I think I've also showed that it's going to be easier to do it by machine. Belt sander, fantastic machine for all sorts of things. If you're not going to be using the edges for cutting, you might as well round those off. So that is effectively what a scraper is, a piece of tool steel. In this case, a little rectangular piece. So we have two rectangular pieces of tool steel. One I've made myself from an old saw, and the other one which I've just bought on Amazon. The other things we're going to need are a file, just a standard mill file for metal, a burnisher, which is just a hardened piece of tool steel with a good polish on it. You can use a screwdriver if you don't have one. Choose a cross-headed screwdriver because they don't have any flattened spade ends protruding beyond the width of the actual rod. And I use some candle wax as well. There's so many different ways of doing this, but this is how I do it. Take my file and using a piece of wood which I set slightly lower than the surface of the vise, I clamp the file in the vise. Then I'm pushing down to keep it nice and square, but I'm also pushing in so that it cuts the edge on the file. You can hear that cutting, and you also see this piece of wood being set down gives the swarf that I'm cutting off here somewhere to fall, and it doesn't bind up on the bottom corner. I then turn it over and do the same again. What I do then is I hold the file against the scraper against the file and just take the surface off there to give a nice square sharp edge. Just like that. I'm going to repeat that process without explaining it on my homemade one. Now we've finished with the file. And you can see we've taken, a fair bit off the scraper. What we're going to do now is form this edge on here. So I like to put a little bit of wax on the burnisher. You don't have to. And then this carpet's in the way. You start by just a fairly light pressure and then increasing in pressure. Flip it over, same. Rotate it, flip it over. That's started to form the edge outwards, and now I'm going to roll it back around. So again, a light pressure at first, so you don't rip the edge up. Tilted first one way and then the other way. So I've done both sides there. I'm now going to repeat the process. Fold that edge back over, push a lot harder. Oop. One last time. That's Feels like a very rough edge on this new scraper there. Probably going to have to redo that one. And then my homemade one. So, let's see if they work. We're just going to use a scrap piece of oak that I've got in the workshop. Let's try the one from the old saw. Oh, yeah, that's cutting better. There we go. So that's my handmade one. So the way you use it is you're holding the ends and you push like that so that you're putting a bit of a curve into it, and you push nearer the bottom where you want to cut, and it should produce a really nice shaving like that. So that's the one I made. Okay, and now the shop bought one. Well, they both work perfectly. So that's something made from an old saw, sharpened, potentially using a candle and a screwdriver. And with it you can produce the most beautiful surface finish. A well-used scraper, well sharpened scraper used well, gives you a surface that you can go straight to finishing from. You don't need any sandpaper. You know what you're doing. So generally you use it like that. You can also pull it towards you if you wish. But in terms of getting the most out of it, getting the most successful cut, you away like that. Most useful on hardwood. You can use them on softwood, and yeah, you should end up quite quickly with a pile of shavings. So there you go. That's how you do it. Quite quickly you end up with real shavings, and I hope you can see that, you know, something which you can make from an old bit of saw out of a skip and sharpen with a bit of candle and a screwdriver can produce an absolutely beautiful surface finish. Or you can, I mean, they're not expensive, you can just buy one, whatever. I'll put a link to this and a file and a burnisher should you wish to go down the route of actually buying one. But fantastic piece of kit. As a violin maker I use them all the time. Really, for what they are, they're incredibly useful. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found this is useful. This is the first of what will be an occasional tool use kind of video. So please like and subscribe if you want to see any more. There we go. Look after yourselves. See you soon, folks. Cheers. Bye.